Hello, everybody, and welcome. You've joined a webinar hosted by Eli Technology. We are a location technology company based out of Halifax in Nova Scotia, Canada. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Emily. I am the Director of Marketing and Communications, and I will be your moderator for today's presentation. Just to give you a little bit of background information on Eli Technology, if you're not familiar, we have a background in telecommunications and fintech and public safety. We started in 2017, and we currently have offices out of Halifax in the United States and also in Sweden. Today's session is about improving workplace safety and security through the provision of accurate multi-level indoor location. Your panelists today will be Pablo Aceron, he is our VP of Europe and Public Networks, and Steve Ledbetter, who is the Senior Vice President of Private Networks for the United States. Before we begin, I'd just like to cover a few basic housekeeping items. Firstly, this session is in record mode, and you will be receiving a copy of that after the event, and that will be posted to a couple of social media sites as well. For the duration of the webinar, attendees are set into mute mode. So if you do have any questions at all throughout any of the duration of the presentation, if you turn your attention to your control panel, your dashboard for GoToWebinar, you will see a little window there that will allow you to enter your question. If you want to type that in there, once the webinar has concluded, Steve will look at those and address those in the order that they've been received. So I'm just going to hand over control of the presentation to Steve Ledbetter, and thank you again for joining us today.
Okay, good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining. Hopefully it's good afternoon. I know for those in Europe, have a good evening. We appreciate you joining the slide for improving workplace safety through multi-level indoor location. And let's check this here. Technology never works. It worked in the practice run and not working out. So we've got it now. So to begin with, let's talk about the why a little bit. So 80% of all emergency requests today are coming through a mobile device. Really, the number is probably north of 90%. It's certainly well over 80%. And we've got a little bit of data on mass shootings. That's the hot topic of the day, with 32% of all mass shootings happening in workspaces in the US. We look at what we're trying to do is add a lot of definition to the current technologies that are used. You're probably today used to a Google map or an Apple map, which would be using Hilo or ELS or possibly AML if it was under a 911 function. So we're trying to add a step function or a generational skip to the location data that's provided. Rather than a slow crawl, we want a big jump. Workplaces are still a very common place for accidents to happen. People live at least a third of their lives there. So heart attacks, all kinds of events, safety events happen. So I know that those of you on the call, both partners and the customers that are on the call, are interested in those topics. I'm going to give you a little bit of mass shooter data. So it's interesting when you look at this slide. So we define mass shootings where 4 or more people, not including the shooter, are injured or killed. So far, greater than 1 per day in 2022. And in fact, in 2019, there were 417. In 2020, there were 611. In 2021, almost 700. And you see from the little red dot, one of the things I think that will be interesting for the people on this call is K-12, which is highly visible from a media standpoint, is only 6.5% of the mass shootings in the US. And when you look at workplace, it's almost 33%. And you throw in restaurant and retail, you're at 60% of the shootings that are happening out in the US. This data, by the way, is from the Violence Project. If you want to look at it, it's a nonpartisan research center, so they just pull data. There's not any, so they present the data. There's no political leaning either direction. So the things we talk to security and workplace professionals all over the globe. We have a couple on our board of advisor members as well. And so we think we have a pretty good handle on some of the issues that you're dealing with, although new ones crop up every month or two. We also do this to give you perspective. We're talking to, in one case, the director of security for one of the 5 largest technology firms in the world. So this is both some mid-tier firms to very, very, very large firms are very interested in what we're providing right now. The ideas behind this would be to keep your employees or your students safe in any kind of emergency or safety setting. The ability to communicate an actionable response or actionable intelligence to a security team and shorten that time to respond, and give an example of that in a bit. We're also, as we talked about early in this, the violence from guns is very, very high, and they're on the rise. We're seeing more and more violent incidents virtually every day, every week. One of the things we want to address as well is there's a high cost to deploy IPS or indoor positioning systems. So with the vast majority of indoor positioning systems, you have a heavy cost on infrastructure and providing hardware. With our solution, there is little or no cost from a hardware perspective because we're utilizing the current hardware that you would have in place. And then liability is a big issue. Many companies are not aware of the RABOM Act, but it is absolutely worth looking up if you're not familiar with it. The RABOM, in fact, took place in January of this year. It's been out for quite some time, but it requires, as an organization, that you have a way for your employees to dial 911 and get a dispatchable address. So dispatchable address out in the country is not very difficult, but dispatchable address in an urban setting where most workers are is actually quite difficult and complex, especially if you're in a multi-story building, and it doesn't exist with most companies today. And then finally, the help that you would give and the feeling of being safe that you would give to your employees, staff, and students. At this point, I'll turn over to Pablo. We'd like to show you a little bit of what this looks like in a demo. Pablo?
Yep, thank you. And you're turning my camera on. Thank you so much, Steve, and everybody for attending today's webinar. I get to do the fun thing. I get to show you a little bit what we are talking about. So the webinar is about helping you to improve workplace safety and security. And one of the ways that you can do that is by really understanding and being able to find where that emergency is happening, whether it is an accident, whether it is medical, whether it is, God forbid, a shooting, whether there is maybe some chemical spills. Anytime that there is an emergency, a way to be able to improve it is to be able to act as quickly as possible. And a key factor for that, especially when we are talking about your facilities, industrial facilities, sport venues, hospitality, you need to know what it is. And typically they are, indoors, they are multi-level, and the current technology, especially the current technology without having to spend significant capital, it is not there until EML. So what I thought what I thought I will do is first show you a little bit the finished product, and then we will talk a little bit more as to how we get there. So what we're going to see is just some testing that we did inside a football, a stadium, an NFL stadium. So we put our technology with one of our partners, and then we were able to improve the location of where the emergency. Oh, it just decided to start. Sorry about that. Let me just pause it. And then we are able to use our technology to be able to let the emergency and safety personnel in the stadium where that emergency is taking place. So biggest stadium, 75,000 people. It is an open stadium, so it's not a closed per se. So it is a different use case. Actually, we were designed for public safety and designed for closed buildings. So you know, we were very surprised when it acted so good, even in places where it is open. So what you're gonna see is us using a testing facility that we have. I'm on the stadium, I make a request for an emergency, and my colleague in Halifax, that's where, as Emily said, where we are based out of, receiving that emergency, and it's actually letting me know what the system is telling me that my location is. And then I turn the camera and we see whether that location matches where I am. So the first one that I did, I was, the emergency came and it said that it was in section 234 and in row 13 and 16. One thing, if I may, I have a little bit of delay, so you have to bear with me for a second. When I press the button, it takes a while. So again, it says 234, row 13 and 16. When you see in here, this comes right from Google Maps. It says that I'm inside the Bank of America Stadium, so that's good. But the precision that it gives me is not what I need in case of an emergency. It's telling me that I'm somewhere in the middle of the field, closer to the, let's call it lower left corner. But that's not good enough to be able to get there and be able to reach. And in reality, if we look at what I am, once that I turn the camera, we will see that indeed I am in 234 and I'm in row 13 to 16. And then what we have done is we have actually integrate our technology inside of other people's technology, in this case, an indoor mapping by your partner Geocom. And then what we will be able to do is that we send the location to our partner, in this case Geocom, and they are able to put, in this case, the orange dot inside their map. So they are able to tell very, very precisely where that emergency is taking place. And if we look in here, I'm trying to stop it, just 1 second, it's just a little bit finicky. But if we look in there, we see that this is where the emergency happened, and this is where the current technology, whether it is ELS or Hilo, is actually telling us that we are. Now, these indoor maps, whether it is Geocom or some other indoor maps, they can be made available to your emergency team or to your safety team. So not only they know what it is, but they can actually have the closest route or the safest route, or in order to get to that emergency. So that was an example. I just wanted to show maybe a second example, just to make sure that you know, we see in there. In this case, the call came, and it said that we were in section 230, and it was in row 13 and 16. So if we look at where the camera is, and by the way, this is where Google and Apple are pointing at. And then if we see where I am, whether I turn my camera on, we are able to see that I am actually indeed in section 230 and in row 13 and 16. It was a rainy day, so I didn't want to move too much. So that's why I'm always on the same row number. And then the one thing that I like to pause a little bit is when we pause in this particular view. So this is where I was on this current emergency call. This is where I was in the original one. So, you know, it's probably, I don't know, maybe 30, 40 meters. So not a big difference, but it is a big difference when it comes to saving somebody's life or being able to stop an incident from happening. And our technology is precise enough to be able to know exactly where you are. The other thing to notice is that the current technology will put us in here for the first call, and it put us over there for the second call. So again, the technology that we have is able to pinpoint very accurate and very efficiently, so around 99% of the time, where we are actually located, even when we are talking about a 40 or 50 meter difference, but that difference matters. It's gonna cut the number of seconds that it takes to respond. And then I will just let play the next one, is just a third one. and we will see how that one turned out. Okay, so it says I'm in section 224, 225, I'm in row 13 and 16. So basically, and I'm in section 224, 225, and I'm in row 13. So again, just some examples. I'm gonna play some examples just to kind of show you. Oh, I just went a little bit too far. Let me just go one back, just to kind of show you what is it that we are talking about. What does the technology do? So how do we do it? And how do we differentiate between EML and indoor positioning systems? We are not an indoor positioning system. That's not what we were. That's not what we are. So let me rephrase that. We are an indoor positioning system, but we are a lot more than that. We are able to integrate with 911. We are actually using the same technology to improve 911 and 112 industry in North America as well as in Europe. But the technology that we have is able to help the location of people in the case of an emergency. So when it comes to looking at the difference between ourselves and indoor positioning systems, especially the indoor positioning systems that they are based on Wi-Fi, the difference is on our patent technology. So we do have patents that they do two things that they are critical when it comes to Wi-Fi, especially when it comes to indoor. The first patent that we have that help us to be able to do an indoor position is that we are able to calculate the access points that you are the closest to. And we don't look at signal strength. That's typically where all the other Wi-Fi IPAs they look at signal strength. And signal strength may be okay when you have a perfect line of vision. It may be okay, but in buildings, when you have concrete, you have windows, you have glass, the Wi-Fi signal transport or transmits very different depending on the medium that it's going through. And that's part of the reason why, you know, if you guys use Uber and you call for an Uber and you're in an apartment building, it typically sends the car to the other side of the street because the signal goes a lot stronger, it goes a lot better through glass than it does through concrete. So you're detecting the Wi-Fi that you have across the street. So the first difference is how we are able to calculate and detect what access points you are the closest to. You don't have to be connected to. So that's the first thing, that the difference. And then what we do is we use a verified source to be able to know where that access point is. In the case of the video that you saw, we were able to get the list of all the different access points and the location from our end client, and then we upload that database into our system. Once that we know what access point you are the closest to, we look at the database and we know what is the location of that particular access point. At Eli Technology or EML technology, what it does is position, indoors and outdoors. We don't develop apps, so we are integrating, and we are currently integrated with a number of apps, and we are looking for more partners, and some of you are attending the call. We would love to work with your app as well. So we actually make those apps to be able to have a precise indoor location. So if you don't have an indoor app, or you don't have a safety app, or you don't have a security app, we have several partners that they provide their app and their functionality together with our technology that can give you the total solution. As I said before, we offer a complete dispatchable location using a verified data source that is the location of those access points. The integration with any technology, whether it is Geocom for indoor mapping or whether it is any of the app developers that we are integrated with or that we can integrate in the future, is done either using APIs or SDKs. It's a very quick integration. And another differentiator between EML and indoor positioning systems is that we work indoor and outdoor. So what you saw in the video, it is for the open part of the stadium, but we were able to locate people inside the gift shop, inside their offices, that they have like a 4-story offices. We were able to locate people inside and outside, and we can actually do it as far outside of the stadium as we have access points with the location integrated with. So we are not an indoor positioning system, but we deliver accurate, reliable, and dispatchable indoor location in multi-story buildings, as well as in open stadiums, as we saw. Most indoor positioning systems, they require significant capital costs and ongoing. The technology that is existing, other than the Wi-Fi IPS, they require a lot of investment, and it's not just the hardware cost; it's actually the installation cost. You have to put power to every point, and then the maintenance cost. And the problem with existing Wi-Fi IPS is just that they are not very accurate and reliable. And it has to do with the way that they are actually able to calculate where the person is using the different Wi-Fi signal exchange. So we are able to fix both. We are able to have the technology and develop the equations to be able to detect very precisely which access point you're the closest, whether you're indoors or outdoors. And then, so there is no capital cost associated with deploying our technology. So anyways, that's it for me for now, Steve. You want to maybe continue with the presentation?
Yes, thank you, Pablo. So where the rubber meets the road, how does this help you? So let's talk about a couple of things. I think we can start with the stadium example, and let's take you there. Assume there's a football game the Carolina Panthers are playing, and there's 75,000 screaming fans, and a tussle starts happening, and there's 4 or 5 grown men fighting, and the attendant there locally needs help. There's the game going on, it's screaming all around, so voice isn't going to help. They're not going to be able to hear you. They don't know where you're at. So through the app, that attendant can let people know what's going on, and then the app, utilizing the ML functionality, reports the location. Hey, I'm in section 234, row 13 through 16, and I need help right away. And they can send some burly men there to help the attendant with that situation. Another example would be the University of Pennsylvania and why they would be interested. So the University of Pennsylvania is in downtown Philadelphia. It's a high-rise university with many floors, and they have their own police force. They have their own SWAT team, and if they needed help, they could push an app. A student or a faculty member could push an app and get a response. Why is that important? The University of Pennsylvania can respond typically around 2 minutes to a reported incident. If it goes to 911 and goes to the police, it is over 20 minutes on average for a response. And you can see a very different outcome with a 2-minute response versus a 20-minute response, and all the things that go with that. The external eyes that may be looking at it rather than it being held internally. A very poor outcome versus a very good outcome. And so the value proposition is very high. I'll give you one more, for instance. So let's go back to January 6th with the Capitol incident in the United States. They did not know where the Vice President of the United States was. They did not know where virtually all the congressmen and senators were. With technology like this, in an incident like that, they could turn on the app, or if they're interacting with the right partner in the right app and they have permission, they could actually manually turn on the app. The Secret Service could have manually turned on the app and said, okay, we've got to get him out of here. Where's he at? And they would immediately know where Vice President Pence was located. They could send a team there. So the response time, they could map a path out. They have actionable intel. People could report in where the rioters were coming up through the Capitol, so they could get an incident report and use that actionable intel during the situation, protecting high-value individuals. All right, so that's some scenarios that maybe make sense and at least provoke some thought for you of how this might help you in what you're doing, either as a partner or as a customer. I think, Pablo referenced this, but one of the really important parts of this is it's actually affordable, because you don't have to put infrastructure. That infrastructure in most cases is already in place, or if you want to add a bit of infrastructure, it's relatively low cost to add more access points, and you have the side benefit of additional coverage for your facility. It's future ready. It's utilizing the current and future technologies that are there. We're built on AWS Cloud, so we're very scalable from as Pablo mentioned, for 911, so for a countrywide deployment. So a deployment into a business is actually quite simple. And the mapping to floor plans is relatively low cost to be able to add that functionality if you'd like it. And then the thing everybody's interested in, obviously they have to be, is regulatory compliance. So we've been built to be GDPR, which I think is the toughest standard around the world, compliant. It mitigates liability for you, particularly around the Ray-Baum Act, as we talked about before. And I think there's a lot of good internal citizenship and the ability to use it for things that might help from a regulatory perspective or compliance perspective. Like, for instance, you could use it to have your security guards check locations throughout the day or throughout the night so that you know they're actually where they said they are without adding infrastructure. So a quick summary, it's scalable, stable, and secure. Again, Amazon Cloud, those things are very simple for Amazon to do, and our technology is built to be in the cloud. We can do on-prem as well, although on-prem is usually for a countrywide deployment because of the expense that adds. We're patented. It's a very unique technology and methodology that we utilize, and I think as you explore, you'll find that it's a very strong, good way for you to have location-based services for your employees or your students and faculty. And again, we use current structure, so no need for additional structure, and we're built with privacy in mind. So we'll go now to the question and answer part of the webinar. And Pablo, if you could join, let me pull the questions up here. All right, and for those of you, I've got a couple of questions here, but perhaps there's some more. If you have a question, please type it in to the question area, and I will read those. So the first question is, what's the difference between EML and Wi-Fi IPS? Pablo, that's probably for you.
Okay. Yeah, no, it's a good question. I think the main difference is, well, a couple of things. One is the patents that we have and how we have spent a lot of our time to be able to get a better way of determining which access points we are the closest to. I think we don't stop at signal strength. It's one of 20 to 30 different parameters that we use in order to be able to understand which access points you're the closest, whether you are indoors and outdoors. As we said during the presentation, this is used indoors and outdoors. It's used for countrywide deployments for 911 or 112. So we needed to work under both circumstances. So we built a lot of robustness and a lot of intelligence into that. And then the other one, it is that it's not just for indoors. You may have a manufacturing plant, or you may have an oil factory, an oil refinery, and you have some indoor locations, you have some other locations. And again, we are able to actually work under both scenarios and giving you a very precise location. So yeah, I think that would be the main difference, ability to work in both. And just because of our patent technology, we can actually be, we can be very precise. No, we actually detect the access points that you are the closest to, no matter where you are, indoors or outdoors. Did that answer, Steve?
I believe so. I think you actually answered the second question that's on here too, but let's just make sure. Does this work both indoors and outdoors? Obviously, the answer is yes. Did you, I think you covered it last, but anything to expand on that? And then the last question I have right now is, how do I become a partner? So I'll take that. Pablo's name's here. If you'll contact Pablo, he will either answer it or pass it on to me, likely pass it on to me, and I'll reach out to you. And we'll talk about what it means to be a partner and how you how you could become a partner. One thing to think about from an EML or Eli perspective is that we're more like Intel. So we're inside the solution, but we're not the full solution. We add the dispatchable location layer into technology in a much more robust way than is being done today. So we can be additive to other current applications or technologies. So if you're a partner and looking to improve the location on your application or your product, please give us a call and we'll talk to you about how that can happen and how it can both serve your customers well and make you money. I don't see any other questions. Emily or Pablo, anything before we wrap?
No, I think I just to thank everybody for attending. I know we are very busy and maybe the nice weather is starting to show up. So we appreciate making the time and joining us for this quick webinar to be able to explain how we do indoor location to improve our workplace safety. So thank you.
Thank you. I agree. And Emily, you'll be sending out the copy of this to everybody on the call.
Correct. So for those of you who are attending today, I will follow up with an email, and it will also be shared through the LinkedIn social platform for anybody who wants to access it there too. We'll format the file first, but it'll be up there within the next day.
Very good. Thank you for attending.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.